Loretta Hood's first baby is due in 7 weeks. She hasn't had the COVID vaccine. For her, it just doesn't feel right, despite today's warnings.
Yeah, it does scare me, and kind of part of me thinks I will, I should just go and get the vaccine, but then part of me is also thinking there's no long-term data. This is still quite a new vaccine, and there's no long-term data on babies sort of 6 months, 1 year, 2 year down the line, and I'm not anti-vaccine in the slightest. I will absolutely get it when the time's right for me, but I just think it's hard not knowing, making that decision for your unborn child, not knowing what the future is.
There's been a rise in unvaccinated women becoming really ill with COVID. At this maternity unit in London, the consultant says while we don't have long-term data, we do have a wealth of women who've had the jab with no ill effects.
We can never say, particularly when we come to pregnancy, that there is no risk. But what we can say is that the evidence so far shows that there is no significant risk in the short term. The one thing about COVID vaccination, because worldwide we have vaccinated so many women, we now do have large numbers of pregnant women who have been vaccinated, and actually more women who've taken COVID vaccine than many other drugs that we actually do give during pregnancy.
Have a seat there for me. But hundreds of thousands of women, the vast majority of those pregnant in the past year in England, didn't have the vaccine. In the 3 months to July, 171 pregnant women with COVID needed hospital care. None had had both doses of the vaccine. The proportion suffering moderate to severe COVID has increased with the Delta variant. 1 in 7 needed intensive care, and about 1 in 5 women admitted with COVID go on to give birth prematurely. The chief midwife made this appeal.
I want you to be safe during your pregnancy. I don't want you to be in hospital with COVID and experience severe illness, or indeed have a preterm birth. So it's really important for you to have those discussions and choose to take the vaccine.
Before April, most pregnant women were being advised not to have a COVID jab. Now they are, but campaigners say it seems even some professionals are confused.
We've heard health professionals believing that the vaccine could cause a miscarriage, which there is no evidence to support that claim. We've also heard of health professionals saying things like, oh, perhaps it's best not to have it in your first trimester because that's when things are quite delicate and you don't want to risk there being any issues, or you don't want it to have it in your third trimester because you're going to have the baby now, so very soon, so why should we risk you having the vaccine? So the messaging has just really put pregnant women off.
Something seems to be putting some young people off getting the jab. This vaccine festival in London is laying on music and food to whet their appetite. Since vaccination was opened up to 18 to 29-year-olds last month, about 2/3 have had their first dose. Here in Tower Hamlets, only about half have taken up the offer so far. Vaccine hesitancy worries doctors, who are seeing increasing numbers of young people being admitted to hospital. Melissa is 19 and liked being able to drop in for the vaccine without having to book. Do you think doing it this way will encourage more people your age?
Yes, definitely. Because everyone my age, they want to go out, they want to go out drinking and, clubbing as well. So it's best to be safe.
To go clubbing, Melissa will need to show a vaccine passport soon. Today, opposition parties accused the government of committing to passports in other settings by stealth and demanded a vote for MPs as soon as possible.
Jane Deeth there. Now, spare a thought for roster managers everywhere. Businesses up and down the country have been struggling to fill shifts as hundreds of thousands of workers get pinged by the NHS Test and Trace app and are told to self-isolate. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has challenged the Prime Minister to bring forward the day when double-jabbed adults can be exempted from self-isolation in England, in line with Labour-controlled Wales. Here's our business and global trade correspondent, Paul McNamara.
Remember these? British Airways owner IAG is betting big you do and ramping up its flight schedule. Between now and September, it will operate 45% of capacity on pre-COVID levels as restrictions ease, possibly rising to 75% by the end of the year. It's not getting people away on holiday, but keeping them at work that Keir Starmer says the government needs to change its rules on, though. In England, as of August 16th, if you're double vaccinated and pinged by the NHS app, you won't have to self-isolate. In Labour-governed Wales, it's the rule from August 7th, and Sir Keir agrees.
Welsh Labour have obviously taken the lead on this and said in clear terms that if you're double vaccinated, you don't need to self-isolate from the 7th of August. And I'm challenging the government, we should do the same and allow some order to come back into our lives, allow some stability for holidays and for businesses.
This is a plan, though, the government is not backing down from, and they say it's data driving decisions.
It is the case that the Office of National Statistics have told us that 1 in 3 people who are asked to self-isolate do go on to develop coronavirus. So important, whilst the numbers are still relatively high, though we're pleased to see trending downwards, it is important to have this last ability just to try to keep a lid on things. It's only 2.5 weeks away, and the 16th of August will be the point at which we're able to get rid of that.
It's not milk.
Some industries are hurting more than others.
It's not milk. It's fresh milk filtered for purity.
A national shortage of drivers is being compounded by the pingdemic, says the largest dairy company in the UK, a company that supplies 2,400 shops and supermarkets. What are you seeing at the moment? How are you being affected?
We are not able at the moment, because we just don't have enough drivers to supply about 10% of those 2,400. And it's worse on the weekend. So last weekend on Saturday, there were 600 shops, and we're talking about big shops here, not just corner shops, big supermarkets, that we just weren't able to supply milk to.
The cows are still working, even if there are too few drivers to transport the fruits of their labour. And with increased numbers of those self-isolating, almost 700,000 according to the latest figures. For industry, August 17th, just 2.5 weeks away, can't come soon enough.
Well, earlier I spoke to Professor John Edmonds from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and I asked him whether he thought cases of the Delta variant had peaked.
It's really hard to say. I know, all of us come on here and always say this sort of thing, but it really is. I think there's probably a couple of things that have been happening, 3 things really that have been happening that have a big impact on the epidemiology. One was the Euros, and that did cause a spike in cases. And then after that, the pingdemic occurred, which probably helped reduce it. And that was straight after, probably related again to the Euros and people being pinged and contact traced because they were in the same setting as someone else. So that probably helped reduce cases then subsequently. Then school closures come into place and kicked in and will hopefully hold cases low now for the next few weeks, next 6 weeks.
The test, trace, isolate, using the app and people staying at home when it pings, is working. It's still a good thing.
Yes, I think it has been quite effective over the last few weeks. I think there's sort of reasonably good evidence for that. That it certainly, there was a bump in cases associated with the Euros, particularly the final. And I think the reduction that happened right afterwards has a lot to do with the contact tracing.
So what do you think the impact will be of stopping the requirement of people who are vaccinated to isolate?
Well, it's an additional risk, of course. Hopefully by then we may have other tools as well. There's a trial that's ongoing at the moment looking at what's known as daily contact testing. This is testing of individuals' contacts every day using a lateral flow. And that trial should come up with some results in the coming weeks, I think. So hopefully there may be that might open up another opportunity.
We're at tens of deaths every day. Is that just the way it's always going to be now?
There's many millions of unvaccinated children, many millions of unvaccinated young adults. And so you add all of those up, that's an awful lot of people. So, if we continue to have infection at high rates in the population, it will overspill into older age groups who are mostly vaccinated, but not exclusively. And the vaccines are not 100% effective. They never will be. And so you will get hospitalizations and unfortunately deaths.
People have been talking about, as getting towards the end of this year and being able to look back on the epidemic. Is there really any reason for that, given there's always going to be a new variant that takes hold, spreads through, some people go into hospital, some people die, and then it dies away? Isn't that just going to carry on forever now?
Although we've had sort of 3 waves of the epidemic, because they've all been interrupted so far by interventions, by lockdowns. So really, we're in the first wave. This is the first big wave of the epidemic where we were all susceptible at the beginning of it. And we're coming out of that now where most of us are immune through vaccination, but also through natural immunity as well. And so I think that once we get over that, that's the sort of the first big wave. And then we can look back at it a little bit. And then I do think we might well be hit by other variants who can escape the immune response to some extent, or even just waning immunity anyway. So I think we're likely to have waning immunity from both vaccines and natural immunity that's likely to wane. And so we're likely to get further waves anyway, even if the virus doesn't mutate even further, which all of us expect it to do.
So it's not over, is it? By any stretch?
We're going to live with COVID forevermore. It's a sad fact. We can't get out of it. That's always been the case. Once this particular genie got out of the bottle back in whenever it was, early last year, we were always going to be stuck with this forevermore.